Creating a real-time visitor counter with DynamoDB, Lambda, and GitHub Actions, a step-by-step guide. This podcast is brought to you by Business Compass LLC. We are an Amazon Web Services advanced consulting partner. We build and migrate workloads to Amazon Cloud. Our website is businesscompassllc.com. Our phone number is 973-638-2228. Our email address is contact@businesscompassllc.us. Introduction to real-time visitor counters and their significance. A real-time visitor counter is essential for monitoring and understanding web traffic on your website. It provides immediate insights into visitor engagement, helping you make data-driven decisions to enhance user experience. This podcast will explore how to build a real-time visitor counter using AWS services like DynamoDB, Lambda, and API Gateway, combined with GitHub Actions for streamlined deployment. Core components of the visitor counter architecture. To create a robust real-time visitor counter, we will use the following core components. DynamoDB, a NoSQL database to store visitor data. Lambda function, a serverless computing service that interacts with DynamoDB. IAM permissions, secure access management for our AWS resources. API Gateway, an API service to facilitate data exchange between the client and server. GitHub Actions, an automation tool to deploy our project on Amazon S3. DynamoDB, the data foundation. DynamoDB will serve as the backbone of our visitor counter, storing visitor counts and timestamps. Create a DynamoDB table with the following schema. Table name, visitor counter. Primary key, ID, string.attributes, visit count, number, timestamp, string.lambda function, handling data interactions. Create a Lambda function to handle CRUD operations on the DynamoDB table. The Lambda function will include the following operations. Increment visitor count, increases the visit count each time the page is loaded. Get visitor count, retrieves the current visit count. Sample Lambda function code. Import JSON. Import Bodo3. From datetime import datetime. DynamoDB equals Bodo3.resource DynamoDB table equals DynamoDB.table visitor counter. Def Lambda _ handler event, context. If event HTTP method equals post. Return increment _ visitor _ count, elif event HTTP method equals get. Return get _ visitor _ count, else, return. Status code, 405. Body, JSON.dumps method not allowed. Def increment _ visitor _ count. Response equals table.update _ item. Key equals ID, visitor count. Update expression equals se set visit count equals visit count plus, val, hashtag ts equals, timestamp. Expression attribute values equals :val, 1, timestamp, str datetime.now. Expression attribute names equals hashtag ts, timestamp. Return values equals updated _ new. Return. Status code, 200. Body, JSON.dumps response attributes. Def get _ visitor _ count. Response equals table.get _ item. Key equals ID, visitor count, return. Status code, 200. Body, JSON.dumps response item. IAM permissions, ensuring secure access. Create an IAM role for the Lambda function with the following permissions. DynamoDB read/write access. Execution role for Lambda. API Gateway configuration for seamless data exchange. Configure API Gateway to expose two endpoints, one for POST request to increment the visitor count and another for GET request to retrieve the count. POST/visitor calls the increment visitor count Lambda function. GET/visitor calls the get visitor count Lambda function. POST and GET methods, data retrieval and creation. Ensure your API gateway is appropriately set up to handle POST and GET requests, and map these requests to the appropriate Lambda functions. CORS implementation, Enabling secure cross-origin communication. Enable CORS, cross-origin resource sharing, on API Gateway to allow your website to request API. Configure the necessary headers in the API Gateway settings. JavaScript code for dynamic display and update of visit count. Integrate JavaScript on your website to interact with the API Gateway. The following script updates the visit count dynamically. Sample JavaScript code. Const API URL equals https:// API id.execute api.region.amazonoz.com/prod/visitor. Async function update visitor count. / increment visitor count. Await fetch API URL. Method, post. Semicolon. / get updated visitor count. Const response equals await fetch API URL. Const data equals await response.json. / display visitor count. Document.get element by id visitor count. Inner text equals data.visit count. / call update visitor count on page load. Window.onload equals update visitor count. GitHub Actions for streamlined deployment on Amazon S3. Automate the deployment process using GitHub Actions. This ensures that any changes to your code are automatically deployed to your S3 bucket. YAML script creation for automated workflow. Create a github/workflows/deploy.yml file in your repository with the following content. Name, deploy to S3. On, push. Branches. Main. Jobs, deploy. Runs on, Ubuntu latest. Steps. Name, checkout code. Uses, actions/checkout at v2. Name, install dependencies. Run, npm install. Name, build project. Run, npm run build. Name, deploy to S3. Uses, AWS actions/configure AWS credentials at v1. With AWS access key ID, $secrets. AWS_access_key_ID AWS secret access key, $secrets. AWS_secret_access_key, AWS region, your AWS region. Name, sync S3 bucket. Run, AWS S3 sync. /dist S3:/ your S3 bucket name. GitHub integration for efficient deployment. Ensure your GitHub repository is connected to your AWS account using the AWS_access_key_ID and AWS_secret_access_key stored in GitHub secrets. Conclusion and additional resources. Building a real-time visitor counter is a practical way to monitor website traffic and enhance user engagement. For deployment, you can create a scalable and efficient visitor counter by leveraging AWS services like DynamoDB, Lambda, API Gateway, and GitHub Actions. For further exploration, you can check out the implementation of this real-time visitor counter on Precious Dipes Resume website. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Please share this podcast, visit our website, and follow our social media links.